All right, we are going to take a look now at the regulation workflow and compliance calendar. So the regulation workflow and compliance calendar are the part of the tracking system. It happens automatically. You don't have to think, what am I supposed to do in terms of compliance? What am I supposed to do in terms of refrigerant usage tests? This compliance calendar and regulation workflow kind of keep you on track, whether it's compliance related items or if it's something as far as refrigerant usage tests. Let's take a look. Where would we go to access sort of this compliance calendar and look at our regulation workflow? How does that all work? Okay, logging in. I want to go ahead here. We'll go ahead and choose a company, and we'll align company, region, and site. The usage events get aligned against the equipment that is aligned against the site. So just think, anytime I've got usage activity, where that's all going to be embedded is going to be against like those individual, sort of systems. So what will happen is as you're having usage events occur on the tracking site, there's going to be, sort of processes that are happening. When you add in usage events, they're all going to see, the leak that was found, maybe the repair that was made, and then, the gas add. That's all going to live in history. That's all going to become part of like the regulation and sort of compliance kind of workflow. That's going to all live here under the compliance calendar. So just think in terms of refrigerant usage events and sort of the tracking, all that's going to be living here in the compliance calendar. Just think if I'm looking at history, I want to come to the compliance calendar. Think if I want to see, what maybe has just occurred. I just entered a usage event. Where would I see the results of that? That would, again, be in the compliance calendar. So we got a couple ways to kind of look at the usage events under the compliance calendar. We have the summary view, which gives us a quick view of what's coming due right now or is overdue, things that may have just occurred, in the month over the last 30 days. So we have historical tasks. We then have the upcoming tasks, and we have overdue tasks. So we have another way to kind of look at the compliance calendar and look at the workflow, and that is this advanced sort of tab. So this takes the view, and what it does is it allows us to take a look, and we can come into the advanced tab, and we can do a couple of things. We can make adjustments with these filters up here. So just like so, as I open this up, I can say if I had some historical events in here, I could change the date and look at those. If I wanted to make a further adjustment and say I want to look at these usage events, but I want to home in maybe on a certain procedure type, I could do that. If I open up these drop downs, we see with all the procedures. Maybe I want to look at a certain type of appliance. And again, this is where the coding of the system, if it's comfort cooling, commercial refrigeration, all that comes into play, because you can use that for filtering and view. And same bit in some of these other areas, the refrigerants and refrigerant types. I open up these fields here like so. Okay. The other thing we can do in this area is we want to get a quick sort of CSV of everything that's coming due within, let's say, this range, and you get like a printout of it. Something else you can do from the screen if you wanted to. What we're looking at now in the compliance calendar is a usage event, and then the results of maybe things that may be coming due in terms of regulation. Or compliance. And so we have a number of leak inspections that are coming due on these various systems. A lot of those are going to come into play if the system has crossed a certain leak threshold. They'll be scheduled as a task, and that's why they're all appearing here. In some cases, it comes down to actually the user logging usage events, but maybe not finishing a certain part of the task. So it'll still land here in the compliance calendar, and what'll happen is you'll see it as being maybe a task that's kind of up and coming, maybe not something that's overdue. These guys that we're looking at right now, these are the results of other sort of past usage events. So let's take a look and see what's happening in terms of the regulation sort of workflow and the compliance calendar. If I were to go ahead and maybe log a usage event, let's just see what the history kind of looks like. Let's see if we've got a scheduled sort of task as well. What I'll do is sort of tell the system, we're going to have a usage event. What'll happen with that usage event is we're going to have like one of these required sort of leak inspections, maybe come due. We want to choose something that would have, a charge over 50 pounds in this case, and one of the qualifying refrigerants. Let's say in this case we'll look at something that's going to be known as class 1 and class 2. So we'll go through a standard sort of the usage event, and I'll start here. So I'm jumping then from our history, sort of bank in the compliance counter, and I'm going into the record event. Because what I'll show you is what does it look like once we've got a usage event entered? What does that look like once it's been added here in the compliance counter? Okay, so we're going to do this with a usage event. We added this sort of test unit in here. Let's say we have this guy right here, this 1,000-pound, sort of rack, this train system. Let's go ahead and let's add this usage event. So just think, anytime we've got an event number that's being generated on the system, that means that's going to be living in history. And if there are compliance-related items that are part of that or associated with that, those are going to be embedded and sort of built into the system. The system's going to schedule those automatically. It's going to look for those. So we'll say, all right, when was this work done? Maybe this was done here, June 14th. Let's just say we added a leak. Where was this leak? I'll say that's on a coil. All standard, information. And we'll look, a bit further at some of the usage events in detail in another session. So I'm going to go through this, fairly quickly. We'll go ahead and sort of log the various bits here on our usage event. I've got work order numbers, invoice numbers, all that kind of good stuff. So I'm setting up a usage event. We see if there are any steps that are not completed. The system's great about catching you and saying, hey, you need to complete that part. Great. Let's go ahead and let's save. And we're confirming we found a leak. We're just going to step through and we're adding this usage event. The reason, again, to do this is that we're going to show what does it look like on the compliance counter. Okay, great. So we've got this guy, got a couple of repairs, and that's because we've got, a couple of usage events that were sort of logged, and this is where we come into usage that may have occurred previously, and we need to just go ahead and take care of each of these repairs. This is what it looks like. Again, if tech sort of maybe started a process, but maybe didn't complete it, not a problem. We can go to, the leak that we just found. We'll take care of the repair. Let's go ahead and say, that was actually done today. And I'm going to do the same bit here on our initial and follow-up. And anything with an asterisk in all these fields, again, make sure that you code those guys. And let's go ahead and let's hit save. And they're linking those invoice numbers. And again, if I, try and go through the site and I leave something unchecked, anything that is with an asterisk, the system is really good at sort of stopping and saying, no, are you sure you want to proceed? Because if you go ahead and do that, things, will not be, finished. And then again, you're going to have one of these outstanding tasks living in the compliance counter. So as we see, it's really good to complete, the various steps. Okay, great. Here's our confirmation. Just kind of stepping through this standard sort of usage event. We're talking about, the leaks being found, the repairs being done. I'm just going to go ahead and step through this, older, sort of usage event. Let's just say this was done here, like so. And let's say we got this, we got using some different test methods. I'm going to go ahead and code these guys like so. I'll add in work order numbers on this guy. All right, so if anything is missing, again, the system pops up and it says, hey, you need to check this box. We've got, a couple of bits on here, or there's 3 different places to go ahead and check those repairs. Let's go ahead and save. Here's a confirmation. Again, we're going to then finally step into our gas ed now that we've taken care of those sort of historical usage events. We're going to say that how much refrigerant was added once we get to the site and this gas add area. And we're going to say, all right, I did have to add in 1,000 pounds. Let's go ahead and let's hit the gas is not going to be part of our stored refrigerant. And let's come back in here. Let's hit save. Here's our confirmation, and we see, whoa, we got a really high leak rate. It's well north of, those required levels. For the commercial refrigeration, you're looking at a leak rate of 20%, and there may be, prevailing, leak inspections. So this guy should, prompt us on the compliance calendar as a future task to have leak check, especially with the holding charge on that. And it's not going to be an annual. This is going to be something that would be, much more frequent. Okay. So we've logged our standard usage event. What does that look like in terms of regulation, kind of workflow, compliance counter? All right, what does that look like in terms of history? All right, I come in here under the compliance counter, and if I were to look this week, and we see that I'm homing in, I've already sort of pre-filled this area, and we're saying I'm looking at this equipment, this rack here, this system. Let's go ahead and click on historical tests. What I'm doing now is just looking at the history and saying, all right, this usage event I just added, what does that look like? What was just done? What are my event numbers? Here are our event numbers, and here are the results of what was done. Okay, so this is what it looks like when there's a usage event that's been logged in the system. So this is where your history, sort of comes into play. The other thing I wanted to look at is, well, what about any kind of up and coming tasks? Maybe there's tasks that are coming due. So we see right here that from back in September 21, because we had that earlier usage event, we have this overdue task. So if I were to make an adjustment in the compliance counter and say, I'm not just interested in what's due right now. This is where the date feature kind of is important. I come into the calendar here and I say, I want to push this out, and I want to see what is happening in the future in terms of what's happening, going out to like 2023. So I could adjust this calendar in here, and I could say, all right, what is happening in terms of compliance? So what's happening in terms of usage events? And most of these guys, these leak inspections, these are all around sort of crossing those leak thresholds and then those required leak inspections. And we see we even have another compliance related report that comes up since we crossing that 125% leak threshold. We have that annual 125 report for the EPA. We see that's another item that's coming up as a future event just before that reporting period. So the compliance calendar is really good at making sure that it's keeping everybody compliant in terms of those requirements for those agencies, whether it's in the U.S. or we're talking in Europe. The other thing it'll do is let you know, all right, is there something that's sort of coming due because maybe a task wasn't completed. And what I'm talking about there is we were looking at all those, when I was entering those usage events, and we were seeing the system was saying, hey, you need to complete this. There's a little red, line of info that pops up and it says, hey, are you sure you want to save this? Or, hey, this is missing. If you were to just push through that and save that without completing that, that'll still live in here as sort of a compliance, related task. So that then becomes sort of part of your workflow. So that is looking at the compliance calendar and looking at the summary and advanced and sort of review of how does compliance sort of kind of come into play. Now, when you set the site up, it's really important to choose the proper area in terms of the compliance, because that'll help with the compliance calendar. And where we would go to do that is underneath our site. This guy is super important once we get here. And if I were to, take a look at this area here and say, I want to see the regulatory framework, this is where it's very important to go ahead and actually make sure we code this correctly. We see I got a F-gas, site and mixed in with a couple of EPAs. So the tracking site can handle the various frameworks for various customer sites. So don't worry that I've got, sites scattered across, the US and Europe and elsewhere. If you set the framework up correctly, then the tracking system will look for that in terms of those sort of behind the scenes compliance items. So here I'm under adding in a new site. This is where the compliance sort of framework is going to come into play. Very important to, check this area. And if you realize, I put something in here and the framework's not right, you can always come back into this sort of sites area and make an adjustment. I added that guy was incorrect. We can add that, in here. So I just wanted to show you, that as well. This is where the buildup of the compliance kind of comes into play. And we'll step through, how in future sessions, how to go ahead and adjust things like company, region, sites, things like that. Okay, great.